by the pound sign.
After the tone, please state your name.
Today's webinar, Professional Learning Communities, Connecting Faculty Development to Student Outcomes, presented by Tara Eisenhower Eversole. My name is Greg Nagy, and I am the Virtual Learning Community Manager from The Ohio State University, who provides technical support for the STEM Equity Pipeline project. Before we start the presentation, I would like to go over some housekeeping items for this webinar. This webinar is scheduled to last roughly 1 hour and is being recorded in order to view this presentation in its entirety later. The recorded webinar will be available in the next few days on the STEMequitypipeline.org website. As you've already found out, you'll be watching the presenter present slides through your live meeting interface while listening to them talk over your phone. If you cannot get the live meeting software to work today, you can download today's slides from the home page of the STEMequitypipeline.org website and follow along using your phone. All the attendees' phones have been automatically muted. The presenter will answer questions after the presentation. However, we can take questions at any time. This is how we take questions. At any time during the presentation and during the Q&A, you may submit a question by clicking on the button labeled Q&A at the top left of your live meeting window. Type in your question and then click the Ask button. The presenter or I will read and respond to the questions at the end of the presentation. You can download today's slides from the handout icon at the top right of your live meeting window. I would like to start this webinar by introducing Freda Walker, Assistant Director of the STEM Equity Pipeline Project. Freda?
Welcome. Thanks, Greg. I'd like to welcome everyone across the United States, and I know in California it's a little bit early for some of us. I'd like to say that Mimi Lufkin, the CEO of the NAEP Equity Foundation and the Pipeline Project Director, is unable to join us today. As Greg said, my name is Freda Walker, and I will be hosting the webinar today. And I'd like to see everyone that is here. So let's start with a poll. I'd like to know how you learned about the webinar, and we're going to put a poll up, and you can answer, just click on your answer. I would ask that if you indicated that it was other, if you might tell us, or one of the, like if you have an email from another listserv, if you could tell us which listserv in the Q&A, and if you had a presentation at a conference, if you could tell us that. Also, if it was an announcement in another newsletter, if you could tell us which newsletter. That helps us know how our media is distributed out in the public. Okay. Greg, I think we can close the poll and let people look at it. Okay, so if you can see, we're still getting a lot of people that come in off of our listserv, and of course those of you with another listserv, if you could, in your Q&A, if you could please tell us which listserv. We've got some that have come, we always have some that come from colleagues, and then from the Pipeline Press. Okay, thank you. The STEM Equity Pipeline Project is a project of the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity Education Foundation. We're funded by the National Science Foundation under the Human Resources Directorate, the Gender in Science and Engineering Program Extension Services Grant. We have 3 goals in our project. One is to build the capacity of the formal education community through professional development on gender equity in STEM education. Also to institutionalize strategies by connecting the outcomes to existing accountability systems. And the third goal is to broaden the commitment to gender equity in STEM education. We have a variety of methods, and our first method is professional development, which you're participating in today. Also teacher training, consulting and technical assistance, our virtual web-based professional learning community, which we hope you'll all go and visit, and our Best Practices Handbook, which will be published this last year, which is our 5th year of our grant. How can you get involved? You'll note that we have 12 states. We have a new state this year, Idaho. But if you're from any of the states listed, then you can join your state team, or also find out from your state team what kinds of activities are happening within your state. You can also visit our website, and you see it's www.stemequitypipeline.org. I'd like to take a second poll and like to know who's participating today. It also gives our presenter a little bit of insight about who's on. So you can just go on and vote. Okay, it looks like everyone's voted. We can close the polls. If we look today, you can see that we have a pretty good distribution. Sometimes we have more of one category than the other, but today it looks like a good distribution. And I'm just sort of looking at that. Okay. Thank you. Those of you that said other, we would appreciate if you were able to write into the Q&A what position you hold so we know who we're reaching with the webinar. Oh, someone's already answered. Thank you so much. If you'll leave it up there, we'll be able to write it down. At the end of our webinar, we're going to try a new technique today, and it's a live webinar survey to get our evaluation. In the past, we've had a link where you could also, and we'll also do this, but send an email. But those of you that are on at the end, we'd really like to have you complete the survey, the live webinar survey, to see how this works, and also to see if we can get a little bit more evaluations turned in for the webinar. Also, the webinar will be archived on our website, and you can go back to your registration email, and there's a link there if you need to go to the archived webinar. I'd like to start today. It's to introduce Dr. Tara Eisenhower-Ebersole from the Community College of Baltimore County. She is an expert in learning communities, and she has a passion to challenge each one of us to explore the use of learning communities to achieve our educational goals. I met her this past summer, and she is full of many ideas and strategies and solutions to help us improve the techniques that we're using within our educational systems. So it's a pleasure to welcome her to give our webinar today.
Thank you, Freda, and welcome to all of you. Today we want to talk about professional learning communities. This is a type of professional development, and the question is by using this type of professional development, can we have any kind of impact on student outcomes? To get us started today, what I'd like to do, see if I can remember how to, this is my first time to do a webinar, so I have to make sure I know how I'm doing this. All right, yes. I want you to think of a time when you learned something on the job. Just take a minute, and then, but not only something that you learned on the job, but you actually enjoyed the process of learning it. And then when you have an opportunity, when you figured out what it is, think about whether you learned it individually, whether you learned it with a colleague, and I would count a mentor as a colleague, whether you learned it within a group setting or with a number of colleagues, or maybe none of those. And so we're going to do this on a poll, and the polls are now open. So let us know what, yeah, good. And the polls are going to close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they are closed. So let's take a look at the results. And we can see that there's a variety. Most of you did not learn individually, but most of you learned either with a colleague or within a group setting. So what I'm going to focus on is actually the last one, how we learn within a group. And that kind of leads us into the concept of professional learning communities. I want to start with just a little story. When I first started teaching, I was in the secondary schools. I'm now at a community college. But one of the things I found difficult about teaching was that I was trying to learn how to be a better teacher in isolation. I had taken all of my coursework, but I wasn't really growing in terms of being a teacher. And at this particular school where I was at the time, we would every Friday get together at the pub for a happy hour. But the one thing about going to a happy hour with a group of teachers is that you end up talking about what you have in common. And what we had in common were our students and our pedagogical strategies and our concerns and issues that were related. And we began to basically use that time as a debriefing and as a chance for sharing our ideas. So if someone came to the table and said, I am so frustrated with my students coming in late, someone might share an idea, well, this is what I do to deal with lateness. And someone else would say, well, this is what I do. And so you begin to take all of these ideas and put them together and try them. And then the next week you come back and say, I tried your idea. So it was a great opportunity for us to share and grow together as a group. It turns out that what we had done on a very informal basis was to create a professional learning community. The general definition of learning community is pretty broad. This is Tinto's definition. It's a place of shared knowledge, shared knowing, and shared responsibility. They can be formal, they can be informal, and you may be very familiar with the idea of learning communities for students. In fact, there's a fair amount of data that is looking at retention rates being improved when students are part of a learning community because they feel as though they belong. And it's not that different for teachers. It's just that we don't, and for faculty and for any professionals, but we just don't have a lot of data in. And so one of the things I want to do today is to take one learning community where I was very active and then did a very thorough assessment so we can kind of look and see if it really does make any difference. Some of the characteristics of a learning community, and this would be true really if you're dealing with students or with professionals, but you need sufficient time. Some of the data or some of the research is coming in saying that faculty development, for it to make a difference, has to be sustained and focused. Some of these single workshops that we do can be fun, but they don't resonate and stay with the professionals. They don't bring them back to their jobs. There needs to be collaboration and sharing. There need to be common goals. There needs to be continuous improvement. And then personalized facilitation. So the professional learning community that I was involved with was a new faculty learning community at the Community College of Baltimore County. And what I ended up doing was a 5-year longitudinal study. I originally did it because I thought it was going to be part of my dissertation, and then I went in and my advisor said, no, you're getting a degree in policy and not in pedagogy. So I ended up just publishing it anyway. The article that deals with the research that I did is available to you. I think it's uploaded and accessible to you if you want to read it. That will give you a little more detail than what I have online. All right, so what was this new faculty learning community about? Well, first of all, we would take all of the new faculty from across our college, and we actually we're a pretty big school. We have about 70,000 students annually. That's a head count. That includes both continuing education and credit. But we end up with about 30 new faculty every year, so it's a pretty big number. But we bring them together, so they represent a variety of disciplines. It's a cross-disciplinary group. And we hope that this program would be active collaborative. The curriculum was more focused on teaching and learning, and I bring that up to you because I think it's important for any professional learning community to have very clear goals and a very clear focus. And if you wanted a subject-based focus or a content-based focus, that would be a different kind of learning community than this one. They would be a part of the program for a year, meeting every other week on a Monday afternoon. And during those couple of hours that we would have the new faculty together, there would be meetings, there would be workshops, there would be presentations, and there was an effort to match the activities with
I think we might have lost Tara with her phone.
Okay, so
if people could
give
just
her a
hold on
chance
for a
to
minute,
go
I think she'll dial in
Yes,
again.
I apologize. Is there bad weather on the East Coast?
There was, but I don't know about today.
Okay.
I'm going to hit her with the chat, too, just to make sure. Right. Okay, I was able to chat with her, so she's going to be coming back on in just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone can hold on. She should be back momentarily.
Hello?
All right, you're back.
I'm back on. I don't see it. Hold on. Give me a second to see if I can get my PowerPoint back up.
Okay.
If I can't see it, would you be able to forward it? I don't know why. Oh, wait a minute. It's coming up again. I apologize. I don't know what happened. So, just hit join the meeting again, so I should be in.
Did you lose connection on your computer as well?
I think my computer went out on me. Yes, I did.
Oh.
So I apologize for that. One of the disadvantages of technology.
There, I see you coming back in
Yeah,
now.
I'm coming in now. Yeah. Well, it looks like from the attendees I didn't lose too many of you. My apologies. I don't know what happened. I think my internet went out suddenly and briefly, and so I am back. And I think where we left off is we were talking about the social events of this new faculty learning community, and we went bowling together, and we had parties, and I think all of those aspects helped. We also had a mentoring component. Each new faculty member was paired up with someone at the college. We also had this program be mandatory. Faculty who were a part of it were able to use their attendance as their required college service professional development, and some of them also received some reassigned time, particularly in the first semester. For new faculty who are creating new courses, they're already overwhelmed, so by giving them one less class to teach, for one semester, it enabled them to kind of get ahead of the game and to also be part of this. One other component I wanted to mention was that we tried to customize this program as much as possible. In the beginning of the year, we would have them indicate what areas they most wanted to learn about, and we would select guest speakers to accommodate that. And we also allowed them, if they had a particular area of expertise, to do some presenting. Some of that were even a little bit not necessarily focused on teaching and learning. We had one faculty member once who had a very strong background in stress reduction and did a session on yoga and stress reduction. So we really customized it. I can't say that each year it was exactly the same as the year before. All right, moving forward. Some of the things that we would cover would be things such as learning styles, students with disabilities, information literacy, service learning, brain-based learning, assessment, developmental education, and lots more. When we assessed it, we used a number of tools. One thing we had was a checklist of faculty outcomes, the things we had hoped faculty would achieve, and they would self-assess whether they had achieved those outcomes. We used a pre-post test of the college's principles and strategic directions to see what they knew when they came into the program and what they knew when they came out. What we wanted to do, though, was to also look at outcomes, student outcomes. And to do that, we used two tools. One was really a tool that looked at the perception of student outcomes. We used their faculty evaluation sheets. We were using something called the SIR-2, which is a College Board instrument. But it was a way to see how students were assessing the faculty members and whether they felt that their outcomes were impacted at all. And then finally, we also looked at actual outcomes in a particular course. And I'm going to go into some detail with each of these. So let's take a look at those. First of all, for the first set of findings, we found that consistently over 5 years, approximately 80% of the outcomes that we had hoped to achieve had been met according to their self-assessments. We also saw significant improvement in their knowledge of college principles and strategic direction. And they were pretty clear in the, we did give them an open-ended survey, a chance to look at qualitative data, and we found that they consistently indicated that the networking and the communication that they had among each other was a particular strength of the program. They were a little concerned with the amount of time that it took and the lack of flexibility because of their schedules. And so what we have done since then is incorporated a virtual component through Blackboard, which has been, which is the CMS that we use. All right, so now in terms of those perceived outcomes, again, let's just go back to that SIR-2 or that faculty evaluation form that they did. That form looks at a number of variables. It looks at how students perceive their faculty members in terms of course organization, communications, faculty-student interactions, assignments, exams, and grading, course outcomes, and student effort. The one thing to point out is that the first three are the ones that this particular learning community focused on. It really focused on how the faculty organized their courses, how they communicated, how they worked with the students. It was not as content-based, so it was not as much on assignments, not as much on outcomes. And what we found is that the new faculty learning community participants had scores significantly higher from fall to spring during their participating year. So what I want to do is just kind of show you see if I can do this. If you look at this, you can see that in particular those three areas that I mentioned to you, the course organization, the communications, and the faculty-student interactions were significantly higher. The problem is that you might be even asking yourself, well, would it have improved anyway from fall to spring just from having had the experience? So we didn't feel that that was enough data. We thought maybe what we needed to do was to create a control group, but that was harder than it sounds. At first, we tried a control group of faculty who were on temporary contracts and had not been a part of the program. Their scores were so low. We just thought that perhaps their scores were so low because temporary faculty are pretty disenfranchised. I mean, it was just sort of very interesting data in and of itself. But what we ended up doing was kind of creating an ex post facto control group. We looked at faculty who had been new faculty the year before this program started, who didn't have the opportunity to be a part of the program, but otherwise pretty much had the same learning process as the new faculty would have. So that's what this chart is going to show you, the next chart. And what you can see is by comparing the control group and the NFLC graduates, the new faculty learning community graduates, that again, particularly in those areas, let's see if I can show. You can see the same areas were much higher for those who participated in the program than those who had not participated in the program. We didn't finish with that. We went on and tried to look at some more data, and we thought, well, what happens, how do they compare to veteran faculty who've been teaching for years and years and years? How are their scores compared? And we found the same thing, that the new faculty learning community participants had significantly higher results. They were rated much higher by their students than the veteran faculty had been, particularly, again, in those three areas. And then finally, one of the advantages of using the SIR-2 data was that, that particular type of faculty evaluation is that we have national data for the comparisons. So when we look at that, we also see that our new faculty were significantly higher than those on the national level. So it's difficult to argue that our new faculty coming out of this program it seems as though they had made a difference to the students. The students had evaluated them in terms of their communication skills, their course organization skills, as being, much higher than they would have. So what about actual outcomes? And this is just a summary of what I've already been saying. In terms of actual outcomes, what we did is we looked at one course, which was our English 101 course, our college composition course. And we set up a learning outcomes assessment project by creating a tool with pre and post writing samples, which were graded blindly by trained scorers, and the rubric they used was a normed rubric. The reason we picked this particular course is that 15% of the courses were taught by new faculty learning community graduates, and our research planning and evaluation office told us that that was enough, that the data might make it, that whatever data we have, it could be considered significant. So what we found was that our students, all of our students, improved from pre to post in English 101 as long as they had veteran faculty or new faculty as their teachers. There was no improvement for the students who had adjunct faculty as their instructors. It was sort of one of those sidebars that we hadn't anticipated, gave us tremendous power in terms of going to our administration and saying, I think we need more full-time faculty, or we need some help with training our adjunct faculty. But more importantly was the statistical and practical significance of the rubric, that the area that was identified in the rubric as source or information literacy was significantly higher for new faculty, students of new faculty, than of either of the other two groups. And that was one of the focuses of the workshop. I'm going to show you the data. It's a little hard to read if you're not used to reading this kind of data, but let me see if I can just do like a free drawing here. Hang on. There we go. What we have over here is all of the adjunct faculty data. And if you look at their differences in means, you'll see that there was no growth at all from pre to post in those students, which is really a terrible pity. If we look over here at the veteran faculty, the one thing that was really odd about that was that their START scores, which are here, were significantly lower than the START scores for the new faculty program. We don't know why that happened. I would like to believe that that happened because the communication skills were so much better with the new faculty, but I have no way of knowing that. Still, there was growth for the students in the veteran faculty, but if we look down here, you'll see that the growth in the area of where we had our focus, there we go, was incredibly high. So we're not only looking at improvement in perceived outcomes, we're looking at improvement in actual outcomes. I also wanted to share some of the qualitative feedback that we did get back, because it kind of was moving for me, and I think it might be moving for you too. I think looking at numbers and looking at data is all very important, but sometimes it's the emotions and the feelings that are behind the learning experience that is also important. The first one says, I love the exposure to other disciplines and their ideas. I learned about education. I've decided to try and go back this summer to start my doctorate, not in my discipline, but in curriculum and instruction. So I felt like that kind of came out of that sort of cross-disciplinary process. The next one says it opens doors to a lot of valuable resources. It also gives the new faculty the opportunity to learn from one another new ways of dealing with student issues, which is another area that I thought was important, is this concept of us solving problems together. And then finally, my favorite, I feel so empowered. The new faculty learning community has given me so much information that I can only be successful. I feel so ahead of the game. So what do we do next now that we have all this information? Well, we created more professional learning communities, and the first one was a learning community for veteran faculty so that they had the same options as our new faculty. We called it Connections. And then we started with one, how do I say this? What we found was that for our institution, the concept of global perspectives was something we really wanted our students to have. But the results were showing us in all of our assessments that our students weren't getting it. So we created a program of workshops that build on each other and that culminate in the development of a project that is implemented into the classroom. We call it the Program of Global Citizenship, and when faculty complete that, they get a certificate, and it's used for their annual evaluations. And we use concepts of that to develop this brand new one, which we are implementing just this year. And this is the one that has connected the Community College of Baltimore County with MAPE, and that is our eSTEM Academy, which is our Educators Equity STEM Academy. What we're looking to do is to take a hypothesis that we have in terms of what might be a possible cause for women and minorities being less represented in the STEM fields, and we believe micromessaging is the culprit, and we're providing an intensive week-long program for these faculty members, but then they will also be part of a learning community over the course of a year as they develop projects and lesson plans and changes within their classrooms. And I think I have one more. No, I think that's it. I thought I had, oh, there it is, the steps to implement a professional learning community. These aren't even really so much steps as things to consider if you decide to develop one. Facilitation is important. I think if you don't get the right person with the faculty, it could become it could be really destructive. We also asked in each case for participants for the new ones, not for the new faculty community since that was mandatory, but for the other ones, we asked participants to submit an application explaining why they want to participate and what they hope to bring to the group. A learning community is shared knowledge but also shared responsibility, and it won't work if people don't want to be there and don't want to contribute and participate. New materials, articles, activities to share have to be included, and there has to be enough time for this to work. A new learning community wouldn't last for a week. You'd have to have a more sustained time period. Discussions and opportunities for sharing. I highly recommend both face-to-face and virtual meetings to increase the opportunities for sharing. This concept of having a project at the end provides focus and a goal. And I think the common goal concept and focus is really important. And then finally, the assessment, evaluation, and making changes based on that feedback is also pretty critical. So that sort of ends the formal part. I wanted to spend some time talking to you about some of your questions that you might have. So I want to give you some time to ask questions. Yes.
This is Freda.
Yes.
And we do have some questions that have come in, and Greg, I may need to find out from Debbie, because I don't know I can actually understand the question, but it has something to do about the slide change from the chart. So you may have to unmute people so Debbie can tell us what it is that she's wanting to ask.
Okay. Will Greg do that for me?
I don't know if I want to unmute. I'm not sure how that would exactly work, but if Debbie could send a second question, just giving us more information, or chat with Freda or myself.
Okay, so Debbie, if you can send us a little bit more information, I can ask that question, but I'm going to move on to a second question that's come up.
Okay.
And it says, pardon me, can you tell us about the support you got from your leadership to support the learning community?
Okay, that's a very good question.
Yes.
It was a small committee that developed the program. I was the chair of the committee, but we had input from a number of other people. But pretty much they were all faculty. We didn't have any administrators on that committee. So what we had to do was a bit of a sales pitch and take it to our leadership team and sell it. And fortunately, it was sold. They bought it. And agreed to a number of the variables. They agreed to give some reassigned time to the faculty. They agreed to make sure all of the department chairs knew not to give faculty classes during the time period that we had asked. I was able to get rooms. There was a lot of support. The only negative side to that is that because the administration supported it, they also saw it as an opportunity to bring sort of their own agenda into it. And that wasn't as, I sort of had my own, we had our own agenda, and we didn't necessarily want an administrative agenda. But what we did end up doing was compromising, and we had sort of a combination. What I tried to do with many of the sessions is sort of cut them in half, so that half might have been to take care of whatever administrative sessions they wanted, and then the other half was the more personal, more social, more sharing, and more strategies-oriented sessions. So I hope that helps. If there's more questions regarding the support, that would be great. But I think one of the things that once I got this data and I was able to show them how important it was, it made opening up the next learning communities very easy, and those were not as, there was no interference with those. I run the global education ones with no interference and a great deal of support, and it's been a very positive experience.
There are actually some more questions that are going to go along with this, but I wanted to ask you, a lot of the things, the support that you say that were given, they were in-kind things that leadership provided for you, and there were things that they could work within their system. Did any of them, did you actually need financial support?
Well, the only one that really the new faculty learning community needed financial support in the sense that they were releasing these faculty members for a semester. So that's 3 credits that need to be paid, an adjunct needed to be paid to replace that. So that was support that they gave, and then they did the same thing for me as the facilitator, was to give me 3 credits, which is 1 course. So I taught one less course while I was facilitating it, and that was sort of a financial piece. I also was able to get a little bit of money for food. I never fed them a lot, but normally the opening day and the closing day, we would have sort of a gathering, and I would get some money to pay for food. And I also was given money for some materials, notebooks, printing materials, things like that. So I didn't actually have a budget, but when I would request things, it was pretty easy to get it. So were there more questions regarding that?
Freda, if you're there, you might have muted your phone.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, there are no more questions on that, but I have some other questions.
All right.
Here we go.
Okay.
How have the faculty accepted being in learning communities?
I think there's a little bit of division. I think there are faculty who have been part of them, particularly the ones who have participated in the new faculty learning communities seem to be the ones who are more agreeable to the global education one. We also have one somewhat similar to learning community for culturally the cultural receptive pedagogy, culturally responsive pedagogy. We have one like that, and we've had some for our technical programs. We had like a virtual learning academy for some of our technical programs, and they've been the ones probably the most responsive. I think there is some resistance from those people who have been around for a really long time and have never been a part of one before. So I think there is some resistance still, but I feel like it's less and less over time as more and more people have come in and have become a part of one. So far, I have not seen anything that's content-based. I told you that piece was missing. Our focus had been primarily teaching and learning, and I think if you look at the ones that have developed since then, they're still more teaching, learning oriented. And I really believe truly that content-based learning communities would be so beneficial to both our professors and for our students. And I don't see that evolving, at least not yet. At least not at our institution. Now, you may have them at your institution. I would love to know if any of you have some at your institution. But there has been a little bit of resistance in that area.
Thank you. Another question. Have you used an online discussion? And if so, what were the participation rates?
What we've done, yes, we did. It's a newer addition. We switched to using our CMS, which is Blackboard. I don't know how many of you use Blackboard. There's lots of them out there, and have set up the discussions. We didn't do chat, but the discussions have been more asynchronous than synchronous. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but the asynchronous discussions have been pretty well attended, but not 100%. What we have found is that you'll get a couple who are really quite active, and sometimes they dominate, and I found it a bit challenging because one time we had a discussion that turned into a bit of an argument between two individuals. So facilitating that can be really tricky. So I would say yes, the participation rates have been high by the ones who want to participate in it. They get on and they chat up a storm and get into big discussions, but it's not everyone in the learning community. And I think one of the things we're working on is to create that virtual component to this eSTEM Academy. This is a new one, and we're going to have a year of them working both virtually and face-to-face. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping our facilitators can really focus on, is getting everyone to participate, but also to treat each other with respect and not using it as sort of an opportunity for a personal argument or discussion.
Okay. This is another question. It says, can you tell us about the impact of virtual learning communities versus face-to-face, and did you find a different impact?
That's a very good question, too, and I don't have a direct answer for you on that one. I do know that I took a class on it was an online class on online classes. So I had an opportunity to do a lot of reading about online versus face-to-face. And one of the things that came up, a piece of data that came up, and it's not directly related to learning communities, it's more related to classes, but sometimes classes can be learning communities. So they said that the success rate of virtual classes is pretty low unless there is a face-to-face component. And they kind of did a bit of a study to see how many face-to-face opportunities led to a higher success rate. And by the time you added 3 face-to-face meetings, the success rate of the virtual classroom almost matched that of a face-to-face classroom. So there's actually a point, sort of that I don't know, limits, where you're approaching after 3, 4, 5, 6 might have made a difference, but not a significant difference. It was like those first 3 meetings. Once you needed 3 meetings to get some things established. So I found that to be a very interesting piece of information. So that's why we're going to try to combine the 2 rather than have just one, because it seems to make a difference in our classes as well. I think there was a second component further to that question. Part of it was success rate, but I think there was a second component to that question.
Well, just the impact and what the difference was between the virtual learning community versus a face-to-face, and then what kind of impact that had.
Well, the one thing, again, going back to the reading that I have done, is another comparative study, and again, this was on courses as opposed to a learning community, but I thought this was really interesting, as they found that the success rate of international students was much higher in the virtual learning opportunities than in face-to-face. And they believe it has to do with processing, that our international students may not always be able to process things that are being told to them in a very fast pace, but if they can do it virtually, they can take their time reading and rereading and really processing the information. And we're trying to bring on more and more international faculty for whom English may not be their first language, and so I think that it may have that may be applicable to those faculty as well. I tended to find them to be more quiet at our learning community meetings, and I didn't even consider the processing time. So providing a virtual community where the processing time doesn't matter, they can take as much time as they need, might actually improve the participation rate for that particular population.
Okay. Now, I think those are all the questions that I have so far. So I would say that unless you do you have any other comments that you would like to make to the group?
I'll probably get off and then have all of my thoughts go, well, I can't believe I didn't say this. I can't believe this is such a great opportunity to share. I will say that if any of you who are on right now have any questions, I think I have my contact information there. There it is. Feel free to email me, and I will stay in touch with you.
Well, we thank you so much. I have participated in professional learning communities, and I feel like that you've given me some really good information on how to evaluate the success of what we're doing. And so I feel that I had good benefit from that. Also, just seeing what's happening in different communities, like a community college compared to the high school that I'm in. So thank you so much, and we appreciate everyone participating. And Greg, I think we're going to put up the evaluation, and we can get people to actually fill theirs in. Are you going to give instructions on that?
Yep, I'll just close out here now then. So we're trying something new, as Fred has said. This is a SurveyMonkey survey. It's a web page within the Live Meeting browser. So it's not very long. If you could fill that out for us right now. There's a Done button at the bottom that you click on to submit it. If you don't have time now or had to leave, you will also be getting emailed this link. If you take it now, you don't have to take the one in the link in the email because it's the same one. So I also want to mention thank you for joining us today, and remember this webinar will be available on the STEMequitypipeline.org website homepage and under the Professional Development heading, and then under the STEM Equity Pipeline Archive webinar heading in the next few days. So thank you, and this is the end of the webinar.